Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Corner podcast. I'm Dylan. I'm your host. And guys, today I got three fantastic topics that we're going to cover. We're going to do a little bit of construction 101 in this episode, and then I'm going to get into engineering fees, basically the whole debate about drawings and whether engineers are any good at their job and can they do anything. And then small thinking is going to be the last piece I'm going to cover on today's episode. And this small thinking is going to be a doozy. I'm going to get fired up about it. I just know I am when I get to talking about this. But first, let's go into construction 101. So there's a few basics that I don't think we cover often enough, really anywhere, let alone this podcast, but is some of the basics, right? Some of the basics that we have in the industry, some of the things that people really need to know to get going in the industry. And one of those things is going to be being able to read drawings, something as simple as understanding what a title block is. And I start with the title block because there's a lot of really important information on the title block. And for those of you who don't know, the title block is basically that nice border that is around the edge of the drawings that encompasses it. And usually it's that big block that is on the right-hand side of a drawing. It's called the title block. And with that title block is basically the same from sheet to sheet to sheet with a couple variations that are extremely important. Those variations are the sheet number and the sheet name. So the numbers are going to be, A101 or A1.1 or A1, A2, A3, A4, right? For A stands for architecture, S for structural, C for civil, M for mechanical, E for electrical, P for plumbing, FA for fire alarm, T for technology, ST might be like security. Typically that's not used. L for lighting, LA for landscape architecture. So there's a bunch of different kind of acronyms that you need to know and those kind of sheet designations. And then on the front of the architectural sheets, there'll be a sheet legend, basically with all the sheets that are going to be contained within the sheet set. And then for each sheet, there'll be sheet names, numbers, all that kind of good stuff, right? So like E 1.0 might be the electrical legend, M 1.0 might be the mechanical legend, A 1.0 is going to be the architectural legend, right? So on and so forth through the sheet. So that's a really important thing to note that, again, this 5-minute orientation doesn't take long to do. It is super basic and simple stuff, and someone can probably figure it out. But explaining to folks at this basic of a level is super helpful so that they can move forward with ease and confidence and not feel stupid for asking basic questions like title block and things like that. The other one is how to read a legend. So no matter what discipline that you're working in, right? Architecture, structure, civil, MEP, doesn't really matter. There's going to be a legend associated with that. So in the first sheet of that discipline, there's a legend sheet that should have all the symbols, legends, annotations for that discipline and what symbols they're using and what those symbols mean, right? So because from one engineer to another, they could and do have different symbols that mean different things. So like if in fire alarm, for example, sometimes it's a hexagon, sometimes it might be an octagon shape with different, it might be SV or AV or S or V or F with surrounded by a circle and 4 little points. Like there's a bunch of different variations of what each fire alarm symbol means, whether it's a horn, a strobe, a horn strobe, a speaker strobe, ceiling mounted, wall mounted, all the variations thereof should be contained within the legend sheet and noted accordingly. Same thing with receptacles, right? What is a receptacle with a slash through? What does a receptacle that's half highlighted mean? What does a receptacle that's square mean? Like there's all these different variations of devices, device nomenclature, and you want to be familiar with either your firms, if you're like an engineer putting these drawings together, or whatever legend that you're bidding off of, so that you're taking off, the same symbol, same item every single time. How do they deal with different elevations for devices or rotations? What does concrete look like versus gravel? What does window look like? What does storefront look like? What does all these different variations within a legend? What does a door swing look like? Is it a single door, double door? All these kind of basic annotations that, again, if you've been in the industry long enough, you're kind of used to. But some of them can change from firm to firm, or from they moved over from CAD to Revit. Now they have a symbol change for what things mean. And so if you're doing estimates and takeoffs, that is very important to know what the difference between like asphalt and gravel is, right? How it's shaded, what the markings are on the shadings, and making sure that you understand the difference between the two, and looking at that legend that should be on the first sheet of the set for that discipline is hugely important. Again, there'll be naming conventions on a title block. Those should be pointed out as to what they mean. Drawing standards in general. So with some drawing standards, there's some things that, like, if you're putting drawings together, typically arrow line should not cross over another line, right? We want to very much limit the number of crossovers that we have within any of our drawings. So an annotation should not cross over another annotation. They should be spaced accordingly with leaders to that element, pointing out what it is. Same with keynotes, right? So a keynote is a specific note that is on the side of the drawings. It'll be in its own kind of keynote legend, and then it'll have a number or letter or both, right? It could be like S1 or A1 or P204 or E1, right? Whatever designation that the keynotes are given, then will match on the keynote legend. So, like, for example, E1 could say that, hey, for this panel, it's going to be a recessed panel, and it's going to be fed with a number 4-inch conduit and 1 4-inch spare conduit. Cool, right? Like, I mean, it could be that simple, or it could be, hey, for this pathway, we want to provide a 1-inch conduit with a pull string, and it needs to extend 10 feet above finished floor with an elbow 90 degrees out into the room with a throat bushing on it and pull string, right? Could be a very long keynote. It could be a very detailed keynote. It could be very simple as a keynote, but those keynotes will appear on drawings and it'll have a number. But when you're putting drawings together, you want to make sure that those leaders don't overlap. As again, this is like very simple and basic drawing standards, but something that we want to explain to folks just coming into the industry. And again, not making any assumptions as to what people may or may not know, since again, some of us have been in the industry for decades, and we want to be able to convey that information without making anybody feel dumb or like they should know. When again, if they're new in the industry, you just don't know any better. So you want to teach people as they're coming up. So again, these are kind of all these drawing standards of what are you really looking at when you're looking at a set of plans. Not too long ago, I went and attended a conference, and at that conference, one of the biggest reasons why some safety violations were noted by OSHA is that guys just couldn't read drawings, or they didn't have access to the drawings in order to make determinations as to like what concrete forms they could or could not remove within a building. So this is like very important stuff, especially when it comes to safety, being able to read like sequence of operations, phasing plans, all these different annotations are super important to be able to move a project forward. And they're important to just understand for your guys in the field, what they're able to basically move forward. So big thing that I want to cover here up front is this kind of construction 101 and drawing standards. It's hugely important, and we just don't take the time necessary to educate folks on what needs to on really just how to read a drawing, right? How to put a drawing together, how to read a drawing, what these things mean, and why they're important. So next, I want to go into talking about engineering fees. So this was a topic that came up on LinkedIn where a guy had made a post saying that, again, contractors bitch all the time about drawings not being put together well, that they're poor sets, that engineers don't know what they're doing. These are terrible things. What are we doing? And okay, fair. right? We know where contractors stand. Engineers can't put a set of drawings together. And so great. Contractors go ahead and put sets of drawings together. When I've asked for this from most guys, I get deer in the headlights look, right? Not from everybody, but for the most part, it's like, hey, well, figure it out, right? Like design this thing. And this is where like the rubber meets the road. Oh, I can't do that, right? No, not going to happen. I don't, I don't know about that. I don't know how to use the computer, right? But the thing that I get is terrible. It's awful. Okay, so we got to meet somewhere in the middle, right? We've learned and see that, hey, contractors, this is not easy when you're staring at a blank sheet of paper as to what needs to go here, right? You tell me is often the response. And so with the you tell me attitude of folks, we have to figure out how to come together and understand there's two sides of this, right? And the thing that I want to point out here is that engineers don't have a crew of people dedicated to that project, right? It's typically in the MEP world, 1 to 2 people on the MEP side of things that are dedicated to a given project. And with that, you are also juggling multiple projects at the same time, more than likely. So we don't have this dedication of resources to a project. Clients are not paying for us to be dedicated as much as they would like that. They're really not paying that high of a fee to have somebody truly dedicated to this and their life poured into designing these projects. Now, on the architecture side, a little more so. But on the engineering side, we just don't have the fees to support, putting drawing sets together to cover everything in as thorough detail as contractors would like. So more and more we get to a design intent. There's more and more systems, especially in the mechanical, electrical realm that have been added onto us. So like electrical, all the technology, low voltage systems have been added to electrical in the last 20 years. And so with that additional scope of work, our fees really have not increased in proportion to the increased workload for the most part. So we have to now understand that, hey, we're not getting paid as much to do this. Everybody thinks BIM is a, magic key to do things, which if you use our software, it very much is. But in reality, BIM for most firms is not like a magic deal. It still takes time to put everything together. It still takes time to coordinate it. Still takes time to run calculations. It still takes time to pull and drag and kick out of the owner all of their requirements for what this project's going to look like. And so these things take time. And then we usually don't get the types of extensions that you get on the construction side. So there is this kind of big demand from everybody to move faster in design while at the same time bitching that things aren't complete. Well, if we don't get the time to put things together, then it's not going to be as complete as it needs to be. Now, at the same time, there's often, as goes with any project, we don't move with as much urgency early in a project as probably should be happening in the engineering and design world. While on the other side of it, as you approach deadlines and that kind of thing, you really move with urgency through a project to get it done and out the door. So there's two sides of this: is firms often don't have the fee to justify the detail that once was on the drawings. Two, they don't have the manpower to do things to actually get it out the door and be as detailed as they should be. Again, this goes to budget, right? But it also goes to a recruiting training problem and really just an industry issue where more people are retiring than we're putting into the industry, especially on the MEP side as engineers. Again, graduation rates for engineers are fairly steady over the decades, except we don't have many people going into the building industry as a whole or construction in general for engineering specifically, because you have all these other options. As an electrical engineer, I can go work in a plant. I can design cell phones or computers, or I could go and work for the utility company, right? There's a lot of options that I have as an electrical engineer where architects don't really have that many options. As a structural or civil engineer, you're pretty much going into construction one way or the other. And then on the mechanical side, again, you also have the option to go and design bunch of different things, work in product development. You can work in a plant. You can uh, design HVAC systems, right? So there's a big plethora for the mechanical and plumbing side as well as the electrical side. And what are you going to do with that? So huge discrepancies on the engineering side and especially the MEP world as to, what you can go and do with your degree and licensure. And then really, so this comes down to resources, people coming in the industry, not having the fees for it, not using any automation tools to give you the time to then review the drawings, put things together, have adequate review, have adequate detail, be able to think about this. And then the secondary thing through the, or really another thing, it's not necessarily secondary, but because there's people coming in the industry, there's fee problems and having adequate resources, there's staffing problems within firms, not having enough people to do it. There's information time lag from owners and other disciplines, especially like on the electrical side, getting things out the door. And then we also look at, having time for QA, QC. That's a big deal in firms and really not having that adequate QA, QC. But the other big piece that I want to talk about is just the distracted nature of what we're dealing with, right? Turning email off and not responding to email within the next 10 minutes is something that a lot of folks is it creates problems, right? So when you're able to respond to emails quickly, efficiently, and all that, people feel good about it, but it doesn't allow you to get your work done. So, and then add on top of that Teams or Slack or any of these other channels, text messages, social media, all the other distractions that we have, work becomes difficult to get done. So really, we've got to actually alter a lot of our working environments and the things that we do at work to be more productive at work, to get the projects we have done, to get out the door, to be more thorough, to have a better end product, to do better for our clients, all the things basically down the line, we've got to be improved upon to basically make that product great. So with engineering fees, contractors can bitch all they want. You're not paying us for the drawings more than likely, unless you're in design build, which is a whole different animal and ball of wax. But for traditional, contractors might complain about it. But again, I don't see many contractors putting drawings together. That's not their bailiwick. And so again, they can complain as much as they want, but there's a lot that goes behind the scenes in putting drawings together and figuring that piece out that often contractors just don't have to deal with. So the last thing that I want to talk about today is small thinking. So I really don't have Facebook. I have LinkedIn, but I very much curate my feed. On Instagram, I only follow really a handful of accounts, and I just don't spend that much time on social media in general. And then on LinkedIn, like I go and peruse for a few minutes, make some comments, look at some posts, do my posting, write my articles, all that kind of good stuff. And then I'm out, right? I just don't spend a lot of time on social media. And so when I was scrolling through LinkedIn, I happened to read some comments, and I really find it fascinating because on LinkedIn, there is like your professional profile is associated with everything that you do, right? So your title, where you work, everything professional is right there for everybody to look at and see. And then you have people making just crazy comments about stuff, and I get like insightful or inciting, responses from people. I get kind of trolling, like that kind of stuff. But some of people are just thinking this is another Facebook, and it's pretty funny in how people comment or go about making those comments on Facebook or on LinkedIn in particular. So I was scrolling, some guy made a post about Elon and him sleeping on the floor at Tesla, which he'd done multiple times for very extended periods of time. If you read the Walter Isaacson biography of Elon Musk, they go into detail at how he did this on multiple occasions to really save Tesla, get the production line up and running, to get, I think it was Model 3 out, all these pieces on Tesla. And really, Elon did a lot of it because of the board made basically this huge wager saying that he couldn't, and put he basically forced them to put huge um, stock uh, awards into his favor, which is partially why he has become the richest or wealthiest man in the world, uh, because of those stock allocations that the Tesla board did give him. He got like $100 million uh, award, and then they've grown tremendously in value. So a lot of that kind of stuff came from that time period. But then you had, so going through these comments, right, and Elon turned around. I had two things that were that just floored me, honestly, that people would be this fucking childish and petty on the internet. But again, it's adults sitting behind a keyboard, and there you have it. So one was, a guy was like, well, Daimler saved Tesla because they gave him a, cash infusion of 40 million and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, yeah, man, that helped. But no amount of money and cash in the world can ultimately save a company. You look at tons of companies that have had billions of dollars poured into them. The money did not save them. Like, yes, it helped to not kill them in a cash crunch, but it doesn't save them long term, right? There's been all these companies that have all this money poured into them, all this VC funding poured into them, and that's not going to save them, right? What saves them is the founder, the CEO, the leader of the organization making a bold statement, doing something incredibly crazy in some instances, but just incredibly bold, and sleeping on the production floor where he doesn't have to, right? To keep his company alive, to work insane hours, to be the example for the rest of the company to come up to his standard, right? Which they're still not going to meet, but to raise the level of performance of the entire organization based on that CEO's performance. And we've seen this time and time again throughout history of many CEOs, and Elon's just the latest one, where that insatiable work ethic, drive, care has what has propelled him and his companies to this just next level. And I think this is so important for people to really understand that it is the leader of an organization that raises the work ethic of the entire organization, right? And that the leader holds the organization to that work ethic and standard. And so when you're able to do this and have people that are willing and worthy and dying for the cause, everybody is going to work harder. And it is because of Elon's work ethic that you have this type of company. The CEO of Ford is not doing any of this. They're not sleeping on plant floors, right? They're not sleeping at the factory. GM and the rest of them are not doing it. Volkswagen is not doing it, and they're about to go bankrupt. Like, there is huge, you just look at other car companies, they're not doing the same thing. They have the same 24 hours in a day. They don't have the same work ethic. They don't have the same drive, and they don't have the same dedication to the mission, to the cause that Elon does for his cause. So this guy missed the point. But then he went on to say that because the poster didn't correct the post or add in this thing, and there were thousands of comments in here, that he should be, it's blatant lying. And because somebody points out that this thing that this guy commented, how dare you, for shame that you didn't update your post and correct this, in an hour. Like, get the out of here, man. That's not the point of the post. But again, you have people being very childish, very small thinking, and not seeing past or seeing the larger point of the post, right? Here you have a man who did not have to sleep on the factory floor and chose to anyway, right? Because the driving to and from the hotel was going to take too much time. That was 40 minutes of work that he could have spent at the plant, right? This is how much emphasis and value Elon puts on time. Man also flew like 250 days this last year, which is just insane. Like, he was on a plane like 8 hours every day. I mean, he flew everywhere all the time. I think he probably only slept on planes in 2024. Like, it's just that insane. And you can look up his flight records; those are public. And I've seen some of that data. If they're different, correct me. But again, the point is the man is working like crazy. He sleeps probably only on planes or barely at all. He slept on factory floors to get his company up and moving. He spent insatiable amounts of time to get this done. And because people are bad mouthing him behind a keyboard or that saying that Daimler was the sole savior of Tesla is absolutely insane. The other one that really just floored me, floored me is again this whole point of people aren't seeing the bigger picture. They're thinking too small. Is like, oh, well, Tesla's got 50,000 people, all these thousands of employees. Okay. GE did too back in its heyday. It's a shell of a company that it once was. Why weren't those employees working harder? Why weren't they doing more? Why didn't they think outside the box? Why weren't they saving the company? Like, come on, man. It is the leader, it is the guy at the helm of the ship that drives all of it, right? He points the spear where they need to go, and everybody else executes. They hold the standard, they fire those that aren't performing. And over time, it doesn't matter. If you've been with a company for 10 years and you start to underperform, you should not be with that company anymore. It is that plain and simple. Like your seniority does not mean that you can be a lazy piece of shit anymore. And this is like the mentality that we have, that just because you've been somewhere doesn't mean you need to work hard anymore. Like that's not how this works, man. You still have to hold the standard. You still have to be good. You still have to continue to uphold the values and the standards that that company sets. And if you don't hold those standards, you don't deserve to be there anymore. And the internet is full of this deserving nonsense. And it's like, you can't deserve something that you don't actually work for. You deserve what you have. And if you continue to not work in the manner that got you to where you are today and the things you have today, then you don't deserve the things you have, right? You will lose them. We've seen this in history over and over and over again, right? People were working hard, then they retire. Well, you're not going to have the same standard of living in retirement as you did when you were working in your prime years. Like you don't make the same amount of money, man. That's just not how it works. And so I really need people to understand that you have to hold a standard. You have to hold a line in the sand of what this is. And just because you have these thousands of people, like, yes, those people at Tesla were working hard, but it clearly they weren't working good enough. They weren't working smart enough to get that plant up and running. Like Elon had to ride hurt over the entire plant and for months on end for everybody to get in line for the production line to run and work and go. And if you read like Walter Isaacson's bio, and some of this might just paint Elon in a good light, which there's going to be part of that. But again, the plant could have done that before Elon showed up and spent 3 months there, days on end, like didn't leave 3 months on end to get the plant up and running and going again. So like, yes, the people do make the company, but it is the leaders' decisions that allow the company to rise or fall. And I really want to drive this home that it is your leadership, it is the people in your firm, it is the ones making the decisions at the end of the day that is going to be the success or failure of your company. So you just need to run the play, but that play has to be good, right? If you choose to keep running the ball and you don't get anywhere on every single play, well, you're not going to win the game. But if running is getting you down the field, well, shit, you're probably going to win the game. If passing, like whatever it is, whatever allows you to move the ball down the field, you should continue to do successful actions. And when you stop taking successful actions, you get what you deserve. And what you deserve is the lack of results that you have. So those are the three things I wanted to cover today: Construction 101, engineering fees, and the small thinking of people. And basically, don't be a child on LinkedIn. Like, have some well drawn out thoughts and allow people to have their opinion. You're allowed to disagree. You're allowed to have dissenting opinions. It's America, and that's the internet. But at the end of the day, have a little bit of grace about it, guys. And that's this episode of the Construction Corner podcast. Until next time.